She was his trusted assistant, his closest confidant. But behind her innocent smile lurked betrayal, a single move that shattered her millionaire CEO's empire and turned trust into a deadly weapon. Peter Carter was a name that echoed across the tech industry. By the age of 30, he had not only built a reputation, but also an empire. After making groundbreaking innovations in technology, Peter ventured into the real estate market, quickly establishing himself as a force to be reckoned with. Everyone admired his success. His life was the epitome of luxury: tailored suits, luxury cars, and glamorous penthouse parties. Yet, his hunger for greater achievements was insatiable. Peter's days were meticulously planned. Mornings were filled with boardroom meetings and business deals, while his nights were spent mingling with high society. Amid all this, one person stood as a constant presence by his side: Amelia. Amelia, his personal assistant, had become an integral part of his life. Beautiful, intelligent, and always poised, she had a knack for making Peter's chaotic life run seamlessly. Whenever he faced a challenge, a single suggestion, or a reassuring smile from Amelia would make everything right. Yet, there was one thing that Peter had never admitted to anyone, not even himself. He was deeply drawn to her. Her beauty and professionalism captivated him, but he kept these feelings buried, prioritizing business above all else. One particular project consumed all of Peter's attention: a massive $2 billion construction deal. This was his dream, a project that would solidify his position at the top. Every day, Peter worked tirelessly alongside his best engineers, architects, and consultants to ensure the deal's success. Amelia, too, poured her heart into the project, her dedication matching Peter's own. But beneath the surface of his perfectly organized world, a storm was brewing. His rival, Mark, the CEO of a competing firm, had always been a thorn in his side. Mark wasn't just trying to compete with Peter. He was out to undermine him, using every unscrupulous tactic at his disposal. As Peter focused on his ambitious project, confident that he had everything under control, an unexpected twist was about to unravel his plans. The day of a crucial meeting loomed near, but Peter had no idea that his world was on the brink of chaos. The day of the much-anticipated deal had arrived. Peter Carter, with his unmatched confidence, walked into the towering conference building, his mind laser-focused on the $2 billion construction project that had been his obsession for the past year. This wasn't just another deal. It was the kind of opportunity that could catapult his real estate empire to unprecedented heights. He had spent countless hours perfecting his bid, ensuring every detail was flawless. Amelia was by his side, carrying the necessary documents, her usual calm and professional demeanor intact. She offered a reassuring smile as they entered the boardroom filled with industry titans, each vying for the same prize. Peter returned her smile, silently grateful for her presence. She was more than an assistant. She was his anchor in moments like these. The presentation was a masterpiece. Peter's team laid out their vision for the project with unmatched clarity and innovation. Every statistic, every design concept, and every logistical detail was designed to impress. The board members listened intently, nodding in approval. By the time Peter finished his concluding remarks, there was little doubt in his mind. The project was as good as his. But as the hours ticked by and the final decision loomed, Peter began to feel an unsettling tension in the air. Whispers filled the room, and his rival, Mark, sat at the far end of the table, exuding smug confidence. It was the kind of confidence that didn't come from preparation, but from knowing something others didn't. When the announcement was finally made, Peter's heart sank. The project had been awarded to Mark's company. A cold wave of disbelief washed over him. How could this happen? His bid had been impeccable. He had done everything right. The murmurs in the room were deafening, and Peter struggled to keep his composure as he watched Mark accept the contract with a self-satisfied grin. The drive back to the office was quiet, the air heavy with defeat. Peter replayed the events in his mind, searching for answers. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just a simple loss. There was a nagging feeling in his chest, a sense that he had been blindsided. As he reached his office, Peter's jaw tightened. He wasn't one to give up, especially not to someone like Mark. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a deeper, more dangerous game. Peter sat in his office, staring blankly at the skyline through the glass walls. His mind raced, replaying every moment leading up to the deal's collapse. The numbers were perfect, the pitch flawless. So what had gone wrong? His thoughts were interrupted by the shrill ring of his phone. Glancing at the caller ID, he saw a name that made his blood boil. Mark. Peter hesitated, but picked up the call. "What do you want?" His voice was cold, clipped. "Relax, Peter." Mark's voice oozed mockery, every word laced with smugness. "I just thought I'd call and congratulate you on—" "Oh wait, there's nothing to congratulate, is there?" Peter clenched his jaw. "Cut to the chase, Mark. You've had your laugh. What do you want?" "What I want is simple," Mark said, his tone turning venomous. "For you to understand that you're out of your league. Competing with me? It's laughable. You're not capable of playing at my level, Peter. You never were." Peter's knuckles turned white as he gripped the phone. "Enjoy your moment, Mark. It won't last." Mark chuckled darkly. "We'll see about that. Oh, and a little advice. Maybe focus less on looking good and more on doing your homework next time. Who knows? You might actually stand a chance." The line went dead, leaving Peter seething. He slammed the phone onto his desk, the sound echoing through the silent office. The taunt wasn't just an insult. It was a challenge. Peter's assistant, Amelia, walked in, concern etched on her face. "Is everything all right, Mr. Carter?" He shook his head, exhaling sharply. Mark called. Her eyes widened. "What did he say?" "Enough to make me realize this wasn't just bad luck. Something happened. Something deliberate," Peter said, his voice firm. "I need to figure out how that deal slipped through my fingers." Amelia nodded. "I'll do whatever I can to help." Peter's gaze softened for a moment before hardening again. "I'll need a full investigation. Every document, every conversation, every person involved. Someone betrayed me, and I'm going to find out who." As Amelia left to begin her tasks, Peter leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Mark's words echoed in his mind, fueling a fire in his chest. He didn't know who to trust, but one thing was certain. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The tension in Peter's office was palpable as he called an emergency meeting with his team. Everyone sat around the table, their faces a mix of confusion and concern. Peter's expression was unreadable, his voice firm as he began. "I want answers," he said, scanning the room. That deal was ours. Every detail was airtight, and yet, somehow, it slipped through our fingers. Someone here knows why. The room fell silent. His employees exchanged nervous glances, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Peter, his chief engineer Robert, finally spoke. "We followed every protocol. The bid was strong. If we lost, maybe the board just—" Peter cut him off. "This wasn't a fair loss, Robert." Mark knew something he shouldn't have. This wasn't coincidence, it was sabotage. Amelia sat at Peter's right, taking notes, her face calm but alert. "Should we audit our systems? Maybe someone breached the servers," she suggested, her voice steady. "Do it," Peter replied instantly. "But that's not enough. I want every conversation, every email, every file related to this project reviewed. Someone leaked our plans." Amelia hesitated for a moment. "Do you think it could have been internal? Someone from the team?" Peter's eyes hardened as he leaned forward. "I don't want to think that, Amelia. But until I have proof otherwise, no one is above suspicion." The room went eerily quiet again. Peter's voice broke the silence. "Start digging. If there's something to find, I want it on my desk by tomorrow morning." As the team dispersed, Amelia lingered, her notebook clutched tightly in her hands. "Peter, Are you sure about this? Accusing your own people could backfire if it's not handled carefully. Peter sighed, running a hand through his hair. Do I have a choice? Mark didn't outbid us by luck. He knew our numbers, our strategy. Someone handed it to him on a silver platter. Amelia nodded, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. I'll do everything I can to help. You know that, right? Peter looked at her for a moment, searching her face. I know. And I trust you, Amelia. But trust is a fragile thing right now. As Amelia left the room, Peter sank into his chair, his mind racing. The walls of his empire felt as though they were closing in, and he was determined to find the cracks before everything crumbled. Peter sat in his private office, the city lights twinkling behind him. His desk was cluttered with files and reports, none of which provided the answers he desperately sought. His phone buzzed, breaking the tense silence. It was Matthew, his closest friend, and a brilliant lawyer. Peter, Matthew's deep voice greeted him. I heard about the deal. I'm guessing it wasn't a clean loss. Peter exhaled sharply. Not by a long shot, Matthew. Someone leaked our bid details, I'm sure of it. But I can't figure out who or how. Sounds like a classic case of corporate sabotage, Matthew replied thoughtfully. Have you considered that the leak might be internal? Someone on your team could be feeding Mark information. The words hit Peter like a punch to the gut. Internal? You think one of my own people betrayed me? It's a possibility you can't ignore, Matthew said firmly. Mark isn't the type to win fair and square. If he got your bid details, it's because someone gave them to him, and it wasn't for free. Peter leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. You're saying there's a mole in my office? Exactly, Matthew replied. But don't act on it yet. If you make accusations without proof, you'll lose trust and possibly your entire team. You need to be smart about this. Peter frowned. Then what do you suggest? Matthew's voice turned sharp, his legal mind at work. Start by narrowing down the suspects. Who had access to the bid details? Who could benefit from siding with Mark? And most importantly, who's been acting off lately? Peter's thoughts immediately went to his team, replaying interactions and behaviors over the past few weeks. No one stood out, but his mind lingered on Amelia for a moment. She was always there, always one step ahead of him. But could she? Peter, Matthew interrupted his thoughts. This isn't the time to second-guess yourself. I'll help you. Hire a private investigator. Let them keep an eye on things without alerting anyone. If there's a mole, they'll slip up. Peter nodded, even though Matthew couldn't see him. All right, let's do it your way. I'll find out who's behind this. As the call ended, Peter sat in the dim light of his office, the weight of suspicion pressing down on him. The thought of betrayal gnawed at his mind. Someone close to him was feeding his rival, and he wouldn't rest until he uncovered the truth. It was unusually early when Peter arrived at his office the next day. The sun had barely risen, casting a pale orange glow over the city. Peter's mind buzzed with thoughts of Matthew's advice and the private investigator he had hired. As he pushed open the office doors, a strange sight greeted him. Amelia was already there. She sat at her desk, completely absorbed in her work. Peter paused, his brow furrowing. Amelia was always punctual, but arriving an hour early? That was unusual. Trying to mask his curiosity, he cleared his throat. Good morning, Amelia. You're in early. Startled, she looked up, her face breaking into a polite smile. Oh, good morning, Mr. Carter. I thought I'd get a head start on the day. There's so much to organize after the last project. Peter nodded slowly, watching her closely. I see. Anything pressing I should know about? Not really, she replied, almost too casually, as she shuffled through a stack of papers on her desk. Just preparing for upcoming meetings. Peter's eyes flicked to the stack of files on her desk. Something felt off, but he couldn't pinpoint what. Good initiative, he said finally, his tone neutral. Keep it up. He walked to his office, his mind racing. As he entered, another unsettling detail caught his attention. His desk was not how he had left it the previous evening. A few files were slightly out of place, their edges misaligned. His pulse quickened. He distinctly remembered arranging everything before leaving. Sitting down, he opened one of the misplaced files, scanning its contents. It was related to a new project they were bidding on, one even bigger than the last. He closed the file, his jaw tightening. Someone had been here, going through his work. He called Matthew immediately. Something's not right, Peter said, keeping his voice low. Amelia was here an hour early, and my desk. Things aren't where I left them. Matthew's response was immediate. This could be it, Peter. Don't confront her yet. Let the investigator do their job. We need solid evidence. Peter nodded, his grip on the phone tightening. Fine, but I'm keeping an eye on her. As Peter ended the call, he leaned back in his chair, staring at the files on his desk. Suspicion churned in his gut. Was Amelia just being diligent, or was she hiding something? The thought was like a splinter in his mind, impossible to ignore. Days passed, and Peter's suspicion only grew. The private investigator Matthew had hired was now monitoring Amelia discreetly. Peter, meanwhile, maintained a careful balance, pretending everything was normal while keeping a close eye on his assistant. Every interaction felt like a game of chess, each move deliberate and calculated. One evening, Matthew called. Peter, I have something. The investigator has been following Amelia. She's been meeting someone, Mark's secretary. Peter froze, the air seeming to thicken around him. Are you sure? He asked, his voice low but sharp. Yes, Matthew confirmed. She's met him twice in the last week, both times in quiet cafes. They sat far from other customers, keeping their conversations hushed. Peter clenched his fist, anger simmering beneath the surface. So it's true. She's the mole. Not so fast, Matthew cautioned. We don't have hard proof yet. Jumping to conclusions could backfire. We need to catch her in the act. Something undeniable. Peter took a deep breath, his mind racing. Fine, what do you suggest? Matthew hesitated, then spoke carefully. We mislead her, create a trap, announce a fake project, something massive, and leave a fake set of bid details somewhere she can access. If she's passing information to Mark, he'll act on it. Peter leaned forward, his heart pounding. And when he does, we'll know she's behind it. Exactly, Matthew said. It's risky, but it's the best way to confirm. The next day, Peter called a meeting with his top executives, including Amelia. He announced a fabricated mega-project worth $8 billion, emphasizing its importance to the company. His team, unaware of the ploy, responded with enthusiasm, while Amelia quietly took notes, her expression unreadable. After the meeting, Peter called Amelia into his office. I'm trusting you with the initial groundwork, he said, handing her the fake bid file. This project could define our company's future. Amelia smiled, a hint of something flickering in her eyes. I won't let you down, Mr. Carter. Peter watched her leave, his face impassive, but his heart pounding. Every move now was crucial, every word deliberate. As the hours ticked by, Peter's office felt like a pressure cooker. He knew the next few days would reveal everything, whether Amelia was truly loyal or the architect of his betrayal. The trap was set, and now, all he could do was wait. 3 days after Peter set the trap, Matthew called him late in the evening. Peter answered on the first ring, his voice tense. What do you have? Matthew wasted no time. It's her, Peter. Amelia passed the fake bid details to Mark's secretary this morning. The investigator caught them meeting at a diner downtown. He has photos, audio recordings, everything we need. Peter leaned back in his chair, the weight of confirmation pressing down on him. For a moment, he said nothing, his mind flooded with disbelief and anger. "So, it's true," he muttered. "She betrayed me." "It's more than just betrayal," Matthew said. "Mark's secretary acted on those fake details immediately. Word is, Mark's already working on a bid based on what Amelia gave him. Your plan worked perfectly." Peter's jaw tightened. "At least now we know. But what do I do about Amelia? I can't just confront her without tipping Mark off." Matthew's tone turned cautious. "Not yet. Let Mark submit the fake bid first. That's when we strike. Until then, you have to keep playing the part. Pretend everything's normal with Amelia." Peter exhaled sharply, his chest tight with the weight of the charade. "Fine. But I want this over soon, Matthew. I don't know how long I can look her in the eye without losing it." The next day, Peter arrived at the office earlier than usual. He found Amelia already at her desk, typing away as if nothing had happened. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice as calm and pleasant as ever. Peter forced a smile. "Morning, Amelia. How's the groundwork coming along for the new project?" "Right on track," she replied, holding up a folder. "I've been refining the bid details to ensure everything is perfect." Peter nodded, his stomach churning. "Good. Keep it up." As Amelia left the room, Peter's gaze lingered on her retreating figure. Her professionalism was impeccable, her demeanor unshaken. But now, he knew the truth. Every smile, every assurance, it was all part of her act. Peter clenched his fists. He hated the betrayal, but more than that, he hated the doubt it had sown in him. He couldn't trust anyone, not even the person he had once thought of as his closest ally. The clock was ticking. Mark's downfall was imminent, and so was Amelia's. Peter just had to play the waiting game a little longer. The boardroom was silent, save for the faint sound of a pen tapping against the table. Peter sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable as he reviewed the final preparations for the fake project. He knew this was the day everything would fall into place, or completely collapse. Matthew entered, his face stern, but with a flicker of satisfaction. "It's done," he said, sliding a folder across the table to Peter. "Mark submitted his bid this morning, exactly as we predicted, using the fake numbers Amelia gave him." Peter picked up the folder and skimmed the details, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. "So, he walked right into the trap." Matthew nodded. "The board is already reviewing both bids. With Mark's numbers being so off, they'll have no choice but to award the project to you." Peter set the folder down and leaned back in his chair. "What about Amelia?" Matthew's expression darkened. "We have everything we need. But before you act, you need to decide how you want to handle this. She betrayed you, yes, but confronting her in anger won't get you the closure or the results you want." Peter stared out of the glass window, watching the city bustle below. "She didn't just betray me, Matthew. She betrayed the entire company. All for Mark." His voice was cold, calculated. "She's not walking away from this unscathed." Later that afternoon, Peter called Amelia into his office. She entered with her usual poise, holding a notebook in one hand. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Carter?" Peter gestured to the chair in front of his desk. "Have a seat, Amelia." She sat, her expression calm, though Peter noticed the faintest hesitation in her movements. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her tone polite but cautious. "Not really," Peter replied, folding his hands on the desk. "I've been reviewing the progress on our new project. Something interesting came up." Her smile faltered. "Interesting?" Peter leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "Yes, like how Mark submitted a bid this morning with details identical to the fake ones I left in your care." Amelia's face paled, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to maintain her composure. I don't understand. Are you saying—" "I'm saying," Peter interrupted, his voice icy, "that I know everything. About you, about Mark, about the meetings. You've been playing both sides, and now it's over." The room fell silent, tension thick in the air. Amelia's eyes darted to the door as if calculating her escape, but there was no way out. Peter's voice dropped to a near whisper. You betrayed me, Amelia. The question is, what happens next? The air in Peter's office was suffocating. Amelia sat frozen in her chair, her once confident demeanor shattered. Peter's piercing gaze bore into her, his words hanging heavily in the room. I trusted you, Peter began, his voice low but sharp. I gave you access to everything, my plans, my vision, and you handed it to him. To Mark, Amelia's lips quivered, but no words came out. Finally, she managed, Peter, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought— You thought? Peter's voice rose, his anger breaking through. He slammed his hand on the desk, making her flinch. You thought betraying me was just business? That it wouldn't destroy everything I've built? Tears welled up in Amelia's eyes. Mark, he promised me it would only be this once. He offered me money, more than I could ever imagine. I didn't know how to say no. Peter's jaw tightened. And now? How's that money working out for you? Because your betrayal didn't just cost me a deal. It cost you everything. Amelia sobbed quietly, her hands clutching her lap. I didn't want to hurt you, Peter. I was desperate. But I never thought Mark would turn on me. Peter leaned back, his anger giving way to cold resolve. Turn on you? What are you talking about? Her voice was barely audible. He's been blackmailing me. He said if I didn't keep helping him, he'd tell everyone I leaked your files. He said no one would believe me. Peter stared at her, his fury now tempered by an unexpected pang of pity. He stood and walked to the window, staring at the skyline. You're right about one thing, Amelia. No one will believe you. But here's the difference between me and Mark. I'm not a monster. Amelia looked up, confused. What does that mean? It means, Peter said, turning to face her, I'm not going to ruin you. But you're done here. Pack your things, leave, and don't expect a glowing reference. Amelia nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you for not destroying me. As she left, Matthew entered the office, a knowing look on his face. It's done, Peter said flatly. And Mark? Matthew smiled. He's finished. The board awarded you the project, and Mark's fraudulent bid exposed him. The legal team is preparing the case. Peter nodded, but his victory felt hollow. Make sure Amelia gets help, he said quietly. Mark destroyed her too. Let her walk away from this. In the end, Mark was sentenced to 14 years in prison for corporate espionage and fraud. Amelia's family received a settlement, ensuring they could rebuild their lives. Peter, though victorious, carried the scars of betrayal, a constant reminder of the cost of trust. As he stood in his office, overlooking the city he had fought so hard to dominate, Peter whispered to himself, "Never again."